this feeling I can't leave. I'm walking and I'm dreaming. Will you dare to give it all up and walk by my side? Do you see the road? Do you hear it's cold? Do you want a part of it? Just getting me apart now.
Hello everybody, I'm Jason Bainbridge, your host, and you're on State of the Nation. This week I have a very special guest introducing Mr. Phil Peters. Good evening, Phil, over there in New Zealand.
Hi Jason, how's it going?
I'm great, Phil. Thank you very much. Now, Phil, first of all, before we get into today's topic, let's go into a bit of a background here. There's a video here that Zeb Jackson put out, and it's probably one of the more concise videos around. And it shows clearly some of the graphic violence that took place on the second attempt of the, I guess it was the government forcing the police in, or the police making a decision on their own. But they certainly did come in and just rumble it up with the peaceful protesters up until that point. It seems that whenever the cops are around, trouble starts and the peaceful protest becomes not so peaceful. So you had some injuries that day. Could you just briefly let the audience know what kind of injuries you had?
Sure. Well, Jason, there was the 22nd of February. I mean, they had been pushing us at other places from time to time between what happened back on the 10th and the 22nd, but that day they really pushed hard down Molesworth Street. We fell back to a line by the Portaloos, and hence a lot of people call me Portaloo Phil. The name stuck, so I've just used it, and that's where I was attacked by particularly a Sergeant Tui Sano, who threw a few punches at me. I fell back, pulled out my phone to take video of them, and went back into the line taking video, and he moved and came and attacked me again. Pushing me up against the Portaloos with the guys with the shields in the front, who's swinging punches over top of them. Then they sort of opened the shields, and he got right in and gouged my eyes pretty severely, both eyes. After looking at the original video of the first few punches that he threw, his second punch wasn't a punch at all. He was attempting to gouge my eyes from the get-go, and
I could see that very clearly. Very clearly, he was literally gouging.
Yes, and it seemed like I had been marked, and his intent was to cause as much damage as possible. After several more punches and having my eyes gouged, I sort of broke through the line, and then a Constable Jones used a bit of a pole and whacked it up underneath my ribs as well, leaving me with bruising under the left-hand side of the ribs. So you can see from the photos and the video how much damage I received to the face, but I had bruises on my arms where they threw me down, and they claimed that I actually assaulted them and resisted arrest when they threw me down on the ground and promptly got on top of me and then asked for my hands, which they had pinned under me. So they're claiming that's resisting arrest.
Oh, these guys are jokers. Yeah, really. I came across a comment, I think it was 2 days ago. I think Carl Barkley had come to the conclusion that they were actually trying to tip over the Portaloos. So
I believe that too.
Yeah, so that the waste would run down to the kitchen and the medic tent. What do you? Yeah. So you agree with that idea?
And that's why we stopped in front of the Portaloos. In fact, I was one of the first people to arrive there, and I knew we had to stop them from getting to the Portaloos because several times they had gone for the Portaloos. As I said, there were other smaller incursions between the 10th and the 22nd where they had pretty much gone straight for the Portaloos to try and knock them down, and they were stopping the guy coming and cleaning them. They seemed to be intent on taking out the Portaloos because, of course, they had already classed us as this river of filth, and I think that once again later on they went for the shower block. It was all about trying to feed this narrative of a river of filth and make us look like we're dirty, and in fact they were doing the dirty tactics to try and remove those sanitation features.
As AC/DC would say, dirty deeds done dirt cheap. That's for sure. And they were using some real cheap tactics there.
Tactics indeed.
They were. Oh gosh. Now, post that, it's been several months now, and how are your injuries now? Like, do you have any long-term damage to your eye or any part of your body since that event?
To my eye, you can see I've got a bit of cosmetic damage. I've got a bit of vitiligo, but the shaping of it and everything is definitely where the punch occurred. It's all changed around that area. For many months, it was about 4.5 months, I had nerve damage all down my cheek and I couldn't feel this part of my cheek. That has eventually gone away. It took weeks and weeks, but it has gone. And I've got a bit of nerve damage around the top of my palate. So when I bite down, there's a tingling sensation through the top of my mouth. I'm hoping that will, like the rest of the nerve damage, slowly heal up in time. But it has been 8 months now, and that tingling feeling every time you bite down is kind of unusual, but I'm getting used to it.
What is the situation with your case at the moment? What's going on there?
So at the moment, the lawyer that I was using that VFF kindly put me in touch with, Kevin Preston, has advised me that basically I'll either have to raise money to hire him directly or use legal aid and risk getting assigned someone else. Now, given my situation and given legal aid is administered by the government, I've decided to fundraise myself. The case itself has not gone to trial yet. It's 28th of October is the next date, and it's a special session. Now, I've talked to a few people about what a special session entails. And from the point of view of a defendant, it seems like it's a chance for a judge to try and convince you to just plead guilty or convince the prosecution to drop the case. As they've already dragged it out 6 months, and it will be 8 months by the time we get to the special session, and they've still persisted with my case, and from advice from Kevin as well, he believes that they will try and take it to trial. So they are definitely trying to attempt to get me for the assault versus police and resisting arrest and inciting violence.
They did something very similar yesterday with Billy Takahika. I was talking to him yesterday afternoon, and they actually, they just plead guilty. You'll just do, you'll get like a couple of months, and you'll only do 2 weeks, and you're out. And it's like, no. Never admit. Never
admitting guilt. Yeah,
absolutely.
And
never admit.
Well, why would you admit guilt about something that's so well documented, so well videoed, the time, the angles, and have, literally 100 people witness what happened, pleading guilty to that would be unethical and immoral. It will be claiming something that didn't happen.
Yeah, it wouldn't be very wise at all either. Lawfully, not legally, lawfully, it wouldn't be very wise either. Because clearly you were actually just defending a Portaloo from being knocked over. That's very clear, very clear.
Even before that part, as I say, the first attack, I wasn't actually right in front of the Portaloos. I was about 5 or 6 meters to the left of where that second video's been taken. There was no reason whatsoever for him to start throwing punches at anyone in that line. He just started attacking me. So, you know, the whole idea of pleading guilty to an assault that has been conducted on me rather than me conducting on someone else is just ridiculous.
So October is the next date. I wonder why they keep dragging these things out. I mean, they did that with Vinnie Eastwood. They did that with Billy Takahika. It's been nearly a year before they even get to trial.
Well, that's true.
Yeah, I think really it's completely psychological. I think the whole battle is psychological. It's to make you stress out and to make you worry about the future. And of course, go ahead,
Jason. You know, I'm trying to get a job, and most good employers will do a police check, and the charges will come up. So the longer that I'm undercharged, the harder it is for me to get a job, and it does put pressure on you to just plead guilty to get rid of it. But then you've got a conviction, which is even worse. You can't go out of the country because most countries just will not accept you to come into their country if you've got charges like that. It's assaulting a police officer. It's a serious charge.
Yeah, that's right. I know for a fact that here in Vietnam, for the most part, if someone's coming over to work from abroad, 100% they're going to get a police check, background check.
Mm-hmm.
It really depends on the situation. If you're already here, then generally they won't worry about it. But if you're moving from another country to another country, most likely they're going to do a police check. So it's really inconvenient for you, per se, considering you are the right man there at the right place, actually. And the guy started the trouble. The police officers they started the trouble. I made a little video about that. Not really good quality in terms of the footage, though. But I made a little video that and demonstrated that clearly those police officers went down there and provoked that every single time. The first time, the second time, and the third time. And that was a big 3 incidences. And of course, you had as you were saying, the little incidences, the little skirmishes around the toilet block and smashing that up and getting that done, and just a few others that were live streamed around, but they were mostly high tension situations and not really violent in that case. It's just more of a Mexican standoff between the protesters and the police. And let's segue out of the situation and let's go into yesterday. You were there in Wellington yesterday. How did it feel to be in that crowd yesterday, knowing that there was a possibility that it could happen again? Luckily it didn't, but how did you feel?
Honestly, I felt very calm and secure yesterday. With Kane Alexander and several others, we were with the NZ United group that came in, and we had our own security, which I was part of. We just focused on keeping our people safe because we had toddlers, we had old people, a bunch of people who were just wanting a peaceful protest. Just they had come to stand up and to be, heard. and our agenda isn't quite the same as the agenda of the Freedom and Rights Coalition, but we stood with them because what they were there for, we agreed in most parts. So, you know, stand with them and add our numbers to theirs. And I was pleasantly surprised. The police acted as a calming influence between the anti-protest protesters. It was a good day, and nobody tried to cause any problems. Even the anti-protest protesters were pretty banal. You know, they did yell stuff, and we yelled freedom a lot. But yeah, it wasn't anything too nasty. It was good.
Yeah, it's rather a silly concept, to be honest, really, you know, thinking that freedom fighters are fascist. I mean, really, the whole idea is just very silly and very immature. And I saw some of the live vids that Rakushan from Rebel Media, he actually did make it in. I saw he beelined straight for that crowd and to get the reaction shots. But I was initially a little bit concerned that they might do a Blue State Democrat Summer of Love on you guys, and I was a bit concerned about that. But luckily, those groups didn't pull, the 2020 Summer of Love Democrat Blue State that they pulled off in the US, and we can't let that gain traction here, because then with critical race theory on top of that, then we are going to go into some really serious violent times. Okay, so where to from here? What's on your agenda per se? What are you going to get up to? Have you formed your own group, or what are you up to?
Well, I've been working with people like the Tararua Freedom Family, Kane and Emma. They have always been very gracious to me, and they've welcomed me with open arms. But I'm trying to find more people in my area, in Porirua and Wellington, to, you know, either make a group if there's no one existing, but I'm trying to find a group. There must be, with a city of this size, there must be a group out there. I'm just not aware of it. I talked to a few people yesterday who said that VFF has a presence here, but I've only been approached by the Whitby VFF group and approached VFF for their help with my legal situation. I'm hoping that, you know, there are groups that I can work with locally, but I've been up and down the country talking to different groups all over the North Island, and just trying to pitch unity. And I've found that NZ United is one of those groups that touches with a lot of other groups like Operation Goodwill, Camp Sour, the Freedom Family, the Manawatu Freedom Hui. These are all great groups, and getting them together on things really helps. And there were a lot of people from the Tararua Freedom Family that came with NZ United, from Manawatu Freedom Hui. Being quite close to Wellington, it's easier for them to get down. But I met so many people yesterday from all over New Zealand. I ran into Farmer James for the first time. We've been friends on Facebook for quite a while, but I've never actually met him and talked to him, and I got to see him. Chantel Baker, who I've run into a few times, and always have time for Chantel. I think what they did to her was absolutely awful. You know, that's nearly 100,000 followers she had, and just to cancel her channel, no real reason given.
Well, every single person in that movement, in this movement in Wellington, is being vindicated right now. Every single action they took was for the benefit of the entire country, and that is now becoming very, very apparent.
And one of the reasons why I was there yesterday, like yourself, Jason, you know, Destiny Church and the Freedom Rights Coalition have never really been of any interest to me. And I'm not a churchgoer, don't believe in God. So it wasn't that part of their agenda that I was there to support. It was,
Right.
to stand up with others. And we are vindicated when we stand on freedom and rights. And it's a great place to stand. We just want freedoms that we've always had in the past. Why, in the last couple of years, they can, for essentially pretty much a common cold, or a strong common cold, coronavirus being the common cold as well, we've just been locked down and we've lost a bunch of freedoms that in past years we would never, ever have given up for something so mild and ridiculous.
Yeah. And now, to rub salt on it, the CDC and now suddenly governments are coming out saying, oh, well, the vaccine didn't actually work. Sorry, we made a mistake. Sorry about that. So who's going to pay for that mistake? Right? That's the question. Who's going to pay? Who's going to take responsibility? Who's going to give all those jobs back? Who's going to heal all those people that have got adverse reaction? Who's going to pay for all those funerals? Right? So it's kind of like, yeah, okay, you can apologize, but no. There's the door.
Yeah, you
take back your box, put everything in your box, get it. You're on the road. Move it.
And already, Pfizer, Moderna, Johnson & Johnson, they've all had the countries that they've worked in to produce these vaccines basically give them free rein. No criminal or no civil law action can be taken against them. It's like made them immune from prosecution, and it's ridiculous. You don't do that before you roll out vaccines. Maybe if the vaccine is very, very effective, the 99.999 percentile type stuff, you could do it. But I don't even see why you would make an exemption from prosecution from those companies. It's absolutely mind-blowing to me.
Yeah, and what's even worse, to top it off, a lot of countries couldn't afford, so they couldn't afford the vaccines, and of course, bankrolling them as well, putting them under financial pressure as well. So they've got a lot to answer for, and I noticed right from day one when Birx came out and said she was going to be, the US was going to be very liberal. And they were not going to be like Italy. They are going to be very liberal with their diagnosis. I knew right then and there that the whole thing was a sham. The whole thing was a scam. And I knew that the lawyers were going to have a field day with this. And look what's happening now. All these court cases are being won around the world. And these guys are now starting to feel the heat. Not quite there yet. We're not at the event horizon point yet, but we are very close to it. I give it 6 months to a year, and I would say that we'll have to we will see signs of justice being delivered, hopefully within 6 months to a year.
I'm less hopeful than you, Jason, but it would be nice. I mean, if you look at the cases that are being won in the courts around the world, most of them are about legal rights that were already there, and they're using religion or belief ideology as grounds to avoid mandates and stuff like that. It's not really civil action against these big companies about the deaths and the vaccine damages. I haven't seen any of those cases won or even filed. In a lot of cases, like New Zealand, we can't. They've been granted immunity from prosecution. We can't file a case against them. The government protects them, and that is ridiculous. The government shouldn't be protecting any private firms, whether they're a pharmaceutical company or the bottle store down the road.
I guess by now New Zealand already has like a gang of their best lawyers that are at least in the freedom movement. I guess there's already a lot of legal work being done on it. But, there's legal and then there's lawful. So I think,
exactly.
I think the answer it lies in common law at this point, and common law is closely linked to Magna Carta. Is that correct? As far as I understand,
Common law in New Zealand is case law, so we need to understand these terms very well. Common law in New Zealand is case law. It's statute law in some cases that has been worked on in the courts. It's laws that may not have made statute in New Zealand, so been turned into acts of parliament from the days of the Magna Carta and the British colonisation. But when we talk common law in New Zealand, we are talking about case law. We are talking about the precedents set in case law. And people seem to misunderstand or have a very poor understanding of what common law is. I highly recommend to have a look at the government's own websites because they administer the law. And when people say, oh, that's not common law, well, actually it is, because the governing body says, and not only that, the law schools will say that common law is case law. And we must understand that. And that's why lawyers get such an advantage, because they get databases to have a look at these case laws that we don't have access to. I would caution using the wording common law. It can be very misunderstood. I'm hopeful in countries that didn't sign away the civil rights of their citizens just to get the rollout, that we will find some way of, making these companies, particularly Pfizer and Moderna, own up to their lack of trials, the actual data that was coming back from the trials that should have caused a lot of concern before rolling out the vaccine to the public. It is disgusting, and I think they should be held civilly responsible for a lot of these vaccine injuries.
They were doing it using society. They weren't using weapons. They were using media as the weapon. They were using fear and media as the weapon, and they were coercing the health system, the education system into pushing these mandates, and it resulted in massive amounts of injuries and death. So I think that, person just in my mind, I mean, I'm not a lawyer or anything like that, but it's impossible. Even immunity won't help them.
When they release these vaccines too early, they've hurried them, you get a spike of vaccine injuries. By far and away, the COVID-19 ones have been the biggest spike that people looking back through history have seen, but it happens with other vaccines as well. It takes a few years for a vaccine to be trialled properly to a large amount of the public, and they do change them. They change them to refine them and make them work better to avoid those vaccine injuries. But in this case, they panic rolled out to a global population. In the billions, they have produced this vaccine very quickly without the right trials and actually getting it right. I was fooled into getting my vaccine. I was there with Dan from NZ United, and once again, he's same as me, he's double vaxxed, and we feel absolutely betrayed into getting something because we thought we were educating ourselves and making an educated decision, but they were misleading us with the data. They were saying that there were no problems with the trials, and now we've seen from the Pfizer document drop particularly, that they knew it was a high level of failure rate. Well,
now that it's released,
that annoys me.
Now that it's released, it has come out. But I just want to touch on a couple of topics. 1918 Spanish flu initially started as during the just before or post
The war.
yeah, and they were giving like all the soldiers these, and they were trying to prove viruses. What the things that they did to try and prove germ theory, yeah, to try and prove germ theory is like they were literally, spitting on and taking spit and rolling it around in another person's mouth and all sorts of things to try and prove the theory. And yeah, the Spanish flu had nothing to do with Spain. It came out of the US labs.
Out of the USA,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah, out of the USA. And they injected it all into the soldiers. And of course, soldiers came back from the war and they just kind of sort of said that, well, yeah, it's got nothing to do with the vaccine. It's because they were in another climate and all that. I've traveled to a lot of different countries, and I'm sure you have too. And there are some odd things that, like when I went to the Philippines, I had something odd happen to my mouth, actually, and up in the inside of my mouth. And that was really random. And yeah, okay, sure. But it wasn't life-threatening enough for me to go rushing out to taking a smallpox vaccine. Little things. Little things, just little tiny things. So I'm not really a big fan of pharma myself, big pharma, since I was like 19. I was very into holistic healing, and I was very much a new ager back then, and a climate change pusher and global warming pusher and all of this and I was a bit of a lefty as well. I was definitely a lefty when I was young and into the new age and all that kind of stuff. Luckily, we've got our age to look back on and in hindsight and say, at least we were doing something interesting at the time. But yeah, the whole thing with the polio vaccines, back in the early 1900s, late 1800s, Japan had stopped vaccinating their population. And suddenly, the kids stopped dying, right? The mortality dropped off.
Especially what's new, if of course you like to be on top of the new thing all the time, hey, good for you. But sometimes it just pays, especially when you're talking about matters of health, to spend the time. And I thought I'd spent a good 4 months researching the COVID-19, but I think I was hasty. 4 months was not long enough by far. I think take a year.
Yeah.
Especially if you're living in a country that's closed off its borders and you've got hardly any known contagion, you might as well wait till the last possible moment to get the vaccine. And after very, well researching it, and if you feel that the research is telling you don't get it, don't get it. Just don't.
Yeah, if you have any doubt in your mind that you're not sure, listen to that tiny voice in your head. Listen to that doubting Thomas in your head, because usually that very first doubt is quite often, when you look back in hindsight, is quite, how many people have kicked themselves saying, I knew it, I should have listened to myself.
So the CDC released data for the first 2 years between, I think it was March the 17th, 2020 and March the 17th, 2022. And the data was only released about 2 months ago. And when you look at the 1,002,000 deaths with COVID, 487,000 of those deaths also had influenza or pneumonia. Now, prior to 2019, the average death toll from flu in the US was about 250,000 on average every year. And funnily enough, the stats are showing us that a full half of the deaths that are with COVID are actually flu deaths. And then after that, there was myocarditis and heart disease and all sorts of other effects. And when it's just COVID all by itself and no other comorbidities, there was only 80,000 out of 1 million were COVID only. Everything else was their normal deaths that, you know, every
right.
year that show us.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
And that's on the CDC website. So the data is there and it's blatantly obvious.
Most of the people involved in it are really literally just doing their job and have no idea.
Yes.
And the thing is so complex that it's really hard to tell who's Arthur or Martha half the time. You know, but generally speaking, most people believe that they were helping society because of the media had gaslit them into a frenzy, really.
Yeah. And, you know, as many a friend and I have talked, one of the first things that I heard from a friend of mine a long time ago, Jeff, was, you know, don't assume maliciousness when ignorance and stupidity might be the answer. That they've got the data there, they're just analysing it badly because they're expecting a result instead of going, well, common sense would dictate these other causes are probably the cause of death. It's nothing to do with COVID because those other causes prior to COVID were causing the same amount of death.
That's right. That's right. And with that, thank you very much for spending your evening with me today. It was very, very educating because we haven't actually spoken about your actual injuries yet. The previous
No.
We haven't talked about it. So a great little discovery for me. Again, thank you very much, and we'll keep in touch and see how you get on with all these different groups that you belong to.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for having me, Jason. That was great.
Thank you very much, Phil Peters. I almost wanted to call you Stu Peters there. Thank you, everybody else, for joining us here in our audience on State of the Nation. I'm Jason Bainbridge, your host. Stay safe, stay clean, and keep fighting for peace.
With this feeling I can leave. I'm working and